And Nick, a massive show and happiness behind you. Tell us more about the situation unfolding around you now.
Well, it's certainly become quite a tense situation in the last 10 minutes or so. There are still hundreds of protesters out on the street, stretching all the way down that street, all the way up that one, and in a long direction behind me over there. The White House is just to my left. Within the last 10 minutes or so, we saw police officers, military police in full riot gear, massing the other side of the fence. And a shout went through the crowd that they felt that this was the moment that they could potentially start to fire gas canisters to try and clear the crowd. As people tried to leave, though, they were streaming in that direction. Some people came to tell us that they were worried about leaving. There was a lot of people up that end of the road who thought that if they went past the police checkpoint, there was a chance that they would be arrested. And they've started to drift back in this direction. But we have seen a tense situation over the last 30 minutes or so, with protesters rattling the fence, the police responding by bringing more officers to their side of the fence.
And Nick, as nightfall besets on Washington, D.C., where you are currently, is there any sign that these protesters might be testing the curfews?
Well, I think they certainly are, Adam. We're now an hour past the curfew, but there are still lots and lots of people out on the street. Some of them that I spoke to earlier in the day said that they were determined to defy that curfew in direct response to what Donald Trump said 24 hours ago, that he was prepared to use the full might of the military on the streets of the United States to crack down on protesters. People were saying that they were therefore determined to break that curfew. Another curfew just starting at the moment over in New York City. They saw looting through the evening last night in some major parts of Manhattan. Their curfew had been 11 p.m. last night. They've moved that forward to 8 p.m. in the hope to try and stop some of that unrest.
And Nick, amidst this upheaval, the state of Minnesota has filed a human rights complaint against the Minneapolis Police Department in the death of George Floyd. I mean, could this be the first of a wave of legal action against police brutality in the country?
Well, it certainly could be. I mean, we've seen a number of police officers fired in other states. There were multiple officers, about half a dozen, fired in Atlanta for dragging a couple of young African-American people out of a car using tasers on them. So it may be the beginning of multiple lawsuits against different police forces across the United States. Bear in mind that there has been a lot of videos on social media, on the news across the US within the space of the last week, showing some of that very forceful crackdown by police on protesters. And of course, all of that could be used as evidence. The protesters, it's not entirely clear whether they will want those type of things to happen. But if the sentiment here in Washington, D.C. is anything to go by, if nothing else, they want the other 3 police officers who were there the day that George Floyd died to also be prosecuted. One of them is being charged, but the other 3 have not, and they're calling for those 3 to be charged as soon as possible.